In the circle with Suzanne. I am so super excited today to talk to my guest who's a genius and a wealth of information. But before I do that, I wanted to just um, express my that I'm heartbroken about the passing of Miami Gardens Mayor Shirley Gibson. She was my mentor. She was my friend. She believed in me when other people did not believe in me, and she's was very instrumental to the growth of Circle of One Marketing and just the fact that she allowed us to be on her team for Jazz in the Gardens. She was a iconic legend of a woman. She did not take any prisoners. I like to say she was not for no foolishness because she wasn't for any foolishness. And she, she single-handedly, not single-handedly, let me rephrase that because there were other people, but she was the lead in incorporating the city of Miami Gardens. She fought with the county for 7 years to take control of their tax dollars, control their own city. And now you look at the city of Miami Gardens, and it's one of the most well-run cities in Miami-Dade County, and it's also the largest Black city in the state of Florida. So Mayor Gibson, I know you're in heaven somewhere, bossing somebody around, making them better like you did me. And I just want you to know, Mayor Gibson, that I will always love you, and you have made a massive impact on my life and the life of others. So thank you, Mayor Gibson. So now we're going to go to my very handsome guest, the handsome and talented Alex Van Mecl. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Suzanne. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
And thank you for your words about Mayor Gibson. Unfortunately, I did not have the fortune to meet her, but I think that those that have seen your words about her and her contributions, and even some of the segments that have ran recently, it really helped to frame just how brilliant she was. So, so as an Opa-Locka, as a neighbor of Miami Gardens, we see her influence, and now I'm more compelled to learn about who she was and carry a torch, to say the same.
You can fall in love with her too.
I'm sure I will.
She would have loved you too. She would have been like, "Come over here, Alex." So she saw talent, and she loved young people, and so Mayor Gibson, I'm gonna miss her terribly, and it really threw me for a loop. This last week has been a very crazy week for me.
Yeah.
Mentally, emotionally, and I'm better. I had a bunch of glitches last week that I'm trying to smooth over, so that just to breathe and to get back in the flow as Mayor Gibson would want me to.
Absolutely.
She would not want me crying for weeks and weeks. She'd be like, Get
back to work.
Get back to work and go do and be extraordinary like I knew you would. So
of course.
So Alex Van Mecl is the founder of the Opa-Locka Preservation Association. He is also a homeowner in Opa-Locka, so he's a resident. And he's also works for my client that we work very closely with, 10 North Group, which is an awesome organization, also doing fantastic work in Opa-Locka. So, but today we're here to talk about the history in Opa-Locka, the beautiful history. Opa-Locka is the largest installation or whatever of Moorish architecture in the country, right?
Yeah, just a slight corrections, Moorish revival. We don't have to get into what that exactly means, but it is truly and uniquely in the United States and North America the most concerted effort to really thematicize a community based on the Arabian Nights and based on what ended up becoming Moorish revival design. It's quite exquisite, to say the least, and my home actually is one of those historic landmarks. There's just over 50 collectively that still stand today, 97 years later.
Oh, wow.
But we can get into that, but my love for the city is pure. Every effort behind every step that I make is for the betterment of a community that I think has so many wonderful attributes, and part of that are the people that have lived there for decades on end that have so much to share about their own stories, their own journey, and that of Opa-Locka as well.
Yeah, it's almost 100 years old. So before we get into Opa-Locka, we're going to start from the beginning. So start from the beginning, Alex Van Mecl. Who are you? Where did you come from? Tell us it all. Tell all of it. Tell us all
the
about
little
it.
boy that be, the little boy that could. A favorite book of mine, The Little Engine.
The Little Engine.
But nevertheless, I grew up on the West Coast in Fort Myers, Florida, and I spent my time between Fort Myers and a little cattle town called LaBelle, another city beautiful. And in the time that I had growing up, you know, I didn't have many avenues to express my interests in things that I was really passionate about. There weren't as many cultural institutions that Great Miami-Dade County or South Florida have at at the at the exposure or at the benefit of youth and everyone involved.
Mm-hmm.
So the one place that I gravitated to, which happens to be located right behind where I was born on Lee Memorial Hospital, was Thomas Edison's Winter Estate. It's the Edison Ford Winter Estates that's been there since 1886.
Thomas Edison of the light bulb?
Of the light bulb, the phonograph, the countless over 1,000 inventions plus, and that's a whole other docent experience I could give you. And that kind of fast forwards me from my younger days to what I ended up doing in high school, which was to actually be an interpreter, a docent at the Edison Ford Winter Estates. I was. Awesome. And so the famous inventors' southern operation as it relates to experiments and laboratory activations, I was a tour guide for that space. And his
that's where you fell in love with history.
That's kind of where it all began.
You were very historical.
This goes back a long time. My grandmother, big antiquer, and she had her own store. And then I had this playground as I saw it, you know, this time capsule to be able to venture to on weekends, give tours of to people from all around the world. So my love for history, for interpreting it, for understanding, and for also recognizing that history oftentimes repeats itself, and that's where we can get most of our lessons from and make corrections to our timelines or the same mistakes. Exactly right. It all began there. And, you know, even my relationship to Edison, not so much as the figure, but the idea has evolved over time. And that's how history should be interpreted and enjoyed and celebrated. There's so many nuances, emotional moments to resurrect. So that's what I love about the experience. And it just happens to be that what I funnel that energy into are sites, locations, tangible things, and places that people can go to and experience and really peg the narrative to the icon. In that case, it was his home. It was his laboratory. 14 acres of a beautiful property.
Oh, wow.
Many years later, after graduating from Florida Atlantic, I got my degree in film and media studies. I worked out in Los Angeles for almost 8 years. I was a publicist.
La La Land. I love La La Land.
I do too. Near and dear, although Florida is home for me, but LA will be my second home.
I moved to Miami from LA.
Okay,
I'm
very
really
nice.
an LA girl who
there you go.
Miami.
That makes that frames a different picture. It makes perfect sense.
Oh, that's the Valley girl.
Yeah. I was my own kind of Valley girl. I lived in North Hollywood, so I was right by the studios. Right. So ironically, I wrote a letter when I was 12 or 13 to Universal Studios in Florida before Islands of Adventure, before their expansion actually started kicking off. I wrote to the actual studio, to one of the executives early on, and I said about my passion for Universal Studios as a brand, as a historical entity, and I said I would run the studio one day. And then, as fate would have it, I didn't run the studio. But obviously, I wouldn't be in Miami.
Like, wait a minute,
I love Miami. I love Opa-Locka, but I ended up being a studio guide at the studio, equivalent to a page in New York, really like renowned. Docent, it's another docent, but I was paid. Docent is not.
Oh, docents are paid.
They're not usually paid, no. And if you're paid, you'd be tour guide, interpreter.
Gotcha.
But needless to say, I did that in LA for a few years, and I loved it because it merged my love for history, film and television, the iconics, Dracula, Frankenstein, some of the contemporary movies like Jurassic Park, Jaws, having filmed on the lot. So again, the idea of history, interpretation, and having a platform to be able to share this information with an audience, that I think that's been the most stressful part, is reading the audience. You know, Edison Home, anywhere from 5 people to 30 in front of me. Universal Studios, it was upwards of 150 in one tour because it was a tram experience.
That's a lot of smiling. That's a lot of smiling.
I tried.
Yay.
I tried. There were factors out of my control. For those of you that know the famous Universal tour, it's a car experience. You drive around a whole lot for an hour and things happen and cars break. So you have to be agile. You have to be responsive. You have to be flexible, and you have to be able to have segues into various other disciplines. And again, another part of history I love is that there's different lenses to have to consider if you're a good historian or history buff. You have to be considerate of the emotional experiences of various communities that played a part in forming the identity.
Their frame of reference, their
absolutely
lens, just like you said.
Absolutely. So pandemic happened, came back to Florida in 2020.
With your very handsome husband.
Well, that came later, but he came very soon after I moved back. Thank you.
He's very cute.
Hopefully he's watching. And then as fate would have it, I started to do what so many did during the pandemic. I had never owned anything of value other than my Edison antique collection, which is cumbersome, and I won't get into that. But I started looking for real estate. Don't ask me why. I met a mortgage broker. He kind of asked me a couple of intrusive questions about my finances, but all for the point of getting me to a place where I could have some of my own generational wealth, perhaps starting. And
I mean, that's really how most people get their wealth, is through real estate.
Exactly.
That's in general, the bulk of it.
Yeah, and I didn't come from anything. My dad had passed away. I didn't inherit anything. Anything that I had was from 8 years of LA vying for something, saving away, knowing that I could never really afford anything in the near future.
In LA, no.
And so I had a little bit to work with, and it was enough for me to go down that path. And 8 houses in, this was in July. It started in July of 2021, the mortgage broker part of it. Then a realtor came into the equation that later became a sister figure to me in August. And the 7th of 8 was in Opa-Locka. It was historic. Things had changed on the outside, but the first thing that captured my eye was the historic marker on the front. This is a registered landmark as part of the historic registry.
The house showed up like, hey,
it called me, and there's so much that goes into that, Suzanne, but needless to say, this was like an August 15th. I wrote a 2-page letter to the homeowner, essentially saying what I would do to take ownership and steward the history of this place, whatever that history would have been. And I had no information at that time other than the marker. I did a deep dive in a 24-hour period about what Opa-Locka was. I've never even heard the name before. I'd been in Miami all throughout my life, Boca Raton, etc. But I'd never heard of this place. And then I was just compelled, sold even before signing on the dotted line.
It is really fascinating.
It is. And so he accepted the offer, and the letter, I think, had a part in that. I read it a year after.
You're like,
got emotional.
I'm smart.
I got emotional because there are specific points that I made that I committed to without realizing that I had, even before, finally
even
closing,
before you knew
moving
what was
in.
Under the hood, you still said this, and now you're doing it.
And that was a whole nother thing. So, once in the closing process, I learned about various institutions like the University of Miami and the Richter Library collection that has over 900 drawings, photographs, watercolors of Bernard Mueller, the architect of Opa-Locka, very early on.
All right, we're going to start. We're going to stick a pin. We're going to stick a pin, and we're going to start from the beginning because it's a lot. It's a lot. So
it is.
I'm going to start with these questions.
Sure.
So tell me about your experience in the space of historic preservation. What drew you to Opa-Locka? I know you just kind of told me that.
Yeah.
But what drew you to Opa-Locka?
I mean, based on kind of the formative years to where I ended up going and being introduced to University of Miami and this impressive collection that had been donated or acquired back as far back as the late 60s, early 70s. So they've had Mueller's collection for some time. It was in that process of trying to discover my own history related to this home that I recently acquired, that I learned about who these people were. It took some time, and the research assistant at the library didn't even think she had found the plans to my home. she sent me a few options saying, I hope these serve as inspiration. And she sent me about 17 documents, and 2 of the 17 were the original elevation drawings of my home. Still have never found the original photograph, but right in the front, perched up above the front door, was a 2.5-foot diameter dome with a little crenulated triangular parapet on the outside of the facade. So I called it the King's Crown. That kind of became the defining and symbolic pursuit of mine to continue to dig.
And is that when this got started, the Opa-Locka Preservation?
It actually didn't. This came about more or less a recent rebrand, if you will, but to complement something that soon, and to your point, quickly started, which was Discover Opa-Locka. That was my immediate solution to a long-standing pursuit of some from the past. So I write off the shoulders of those that came before me that had started a historic program in the late 80s of Opa-Locka's history. And there really hasn't been a lot of activity since. Dr. Ingram, Robert Ingram, a mayor, police chief of the city and professor, he was a champion of Opa-Locka's history well into the 90s before his passing in, I believe it was 2007. But since then, there really hasn't been a concerted effort, a real campaignizing of resources for preservation, restoration, archiving for that matter. So Discover Opa-Locka and the internet, social media of it all was an initial attempt to just kind of regurgitate and relive the experience of going through an archive and seeing some of these incredible Moorish drawings of Arabic, Persian, Chinese influence, Far East movement is what Opa-Locka's aesthetic was. So that is kind of what the draw to preservation was with the digital platform of social media, Facebook, Instagram, Discover Opa-Locka. And then Opa-Locka Preservation Association came as my solution to wanting to create a more outward-facing, community-driven organization that is very much in its infancy, but I have every intent to scale it, as you probably would know.
I can imagine you've had a lot of challenges. So what are the challenges of reigniting a preservation movement in a city like Opa-Locka that's had a lot of other challenges that everybody's aware of? So
and unspoken, for those that understand the brand of Opa-Locka and can appreciate also that it's a shared challenge that many municipalities have. It's just, for whatever reason, Opa-Locka has been on the receiving end of a level of hate or mistrust or what have you. It seems cyclical. It's a cycle I hope breaks at some point in leading up to 100th anniversary.
It's starting to. And North Group is breaking it. The city of Opa-Locka is really, all of the changes that they're making, the new mayor, the new city manager, I believe, and I've watched it for a long time, because we've been the agency for 10 North Group for about 11 years. It seems like there's a breath of fresh air coming. So it seems like you actually appeared at the right time.
And that's a sensitive observation for me, because I live next to people that have bared the brunt of a lot of years of that mistrust, that disdain for, and to the point of challenge, how do you get buy-in from historic homeowners that want nothing to do with the city? They want nothing to do with the kind of outreach they'd be interested in making to the homeowner to do restoration activities, etc.
They don't care like you care.
Well, I believe maybe not, but there is an opportunity to educate. There's an opportunity to enlighten and to really involve and welcome them into the conversation under the guise of the Opa-Locka Preservation Association, which is in support of efforts that 10 North Group is in pursuit of and committed to, with cultural activations, Art Basel sanctioned events, perhaps a museum in the future, a heritage historic trail soon in the making. All these things, good things are happening. Do people know about it? They will over time. It's being rolled out. It's all strategic. I'm very strategic in how I approach this, but none of this matters without Opa-Lockans, the community embracing it. And my hope is that over time, if I'm the face of this or not, people will embrace this and will continue to shepherd the efforts of institutionalizing preservation as well as restoration. Because going back to the challenge, many of the homes in Opa-Locka, through change of ownership, have changed their appearance. Some owners didn't even know that their home was a historic landmark.
Oh, wow.
That was information never shared with them.
Yeah.
And in the process, like any homeowner, you get excited to make changes. You inherit things you didn't know you were going to inherit,
or
that are
you didn't even know
structurally
had value.
right, structurally compromised elements that require immediate attention. And in the process of doing so, you get that new door or window, and it looks nothing like it should have. And by should have, it's just Preservation Guidelines 101. But so we have to kind of have these conversations, revisit these critical moments with the homeowners specifically, since that makes up the largest inventory of historic structures and landmarks. Really instill the importance of the why bring back the dome, why bring back that minaret or that pointed arch. And I get really particular about these things, but it's for good reason, because it was done right at the beginning. It was done right. It was experiential.
Tell us about the beginning, because the city turns 100 years old in 2026. So
yes,
tell us a little bit about the beginning.
The little bit about the beginning is that the city was chartered May 14th, 1926. Fun fact, as a town, not as a city.
Okay.
It took a year, because they wanted more taxes from their residents. It took a year to incorporate as a city. So its city anniversary would actually be 2027. But as an established municipality of the state of Florida, the 8th oldest in Miami-Dade, it is Opa-Locka's 1926. So there were 28 voters that came together as represented in the new seal that was spearheaded by Mayor John Taylor Jr. It's got 28 blocks around the core center, which is the iconic Opa-Locka Administration Building, former historic City Hall. And needless to say, that's kind of like the genesis of Opa-Locka as a development. It was in part a residential community that was abundant with recreational activities, an archery club, a 2,000 seat auditorium swimming pool with seminal acts. Seminal acts, famous diving acts. The archery club had Howard Hill, who was a noted Hollywood stunt double for archery specifically. We had Johnny Weissmuller, who played the second ever Tarzan in the MGM franchise of the film name. He actually gave swimming instructions at the Opa-Locka swimming pool. And this was just what it was to be in Opa-Locka from 26 to about 30, and then the Navy took over. Also important to mention in terms of lenses, viewpoints, and actual challenges for the time is Opa-Locka was a segregated community. And for those that don't know, Opa-Locka's historic core was the white community. It was White Town. And then on the right-hand side, east of that area, the only access point being Alibaba Avenue at the time, went into what was known as Magnolia Park, also known as the Triangle.
Oh,
and that was the black area. And so I'm trying to find information, because shockingly, there aren't institutions that harbor Black history. The Black Archives does not have information about Opa-Locka's Black history.
Have you gone to History Miami?
Yep. Every institution. I've dug, but it's, it's important to me. I might not represent visually, by skin, the community, but I do represent and I do care for, and it matters to me to tell a complete and inclusive story. And I'm a receptacle of feedback, of opinions, of emotions, and also anecdotal experiences that help inform and chart my course in relation to archiving, presentation of historical information, and getting buy-in from the community. And it's not to be tactical in a way, but again, none of this matters to me, to anybody, if not for the community embracing it. And today it's mostly Black and brown, Black and Latino, and there needs to be a place for that.
You're not Black. You're not Black, however, the work that you're doing is significant and important. And in my world, so you're not Black, but you're an ally. So, no, you're not Black, obviously. But you're an ally. You're sitting here and you're putting your time, your effort, your money, your brain power, your social media into bringing this Opa-Locka story to life, when, you know what I mean? I'm grateful. I'm grateful from somebody who has been in Opa-Locka doing work and seen it go, just get dragged through the mud while people are still trying to get ahead and do new and better things. The fact that you exist, and I just learned a bunch of stuff I didn't know. So I'm grateful. Thank you for showing up for doing this. So I wanted to, because we're running out of time, I wanted to talk about, okay, so on November 4th, very excited about this, very excited. On November 4th, Alex is going to be leading a beautiful tour of historic Opa-Locka. We are very excited because we have Jane Wooldridge from the Miami Herald and Isaiah Smalls from the Miami Herald, who are going to be joining us because they're also fascinated with history, culture, architecture, and, and the Black experience. So it's November 4th. It's at 10 o'clock. It starts at the historic Opa-Locka train station, which is at 490 Alibaba Avenue.
Correct.
And then what's going to happen?
And so, yes, all of that's happening. You can get more information. Go to discoveropalocka.org. It's on Eventbrite. You can sign up or just show up 10 a.m. But needless to say, it's a walking tour, so wear comfortable shoes.
It's free. You don't
It's
have to
free.
pay.
That's the most important thing. I've conducted 2 of these in this year, 2023. This is the 3rd one now. And I'm not going to stop. We're not going to stop. We want to make this narrative, the complete one, for what it's worth, accessible, and we want people to see the possibilities, not the potential. I hate the word potential in relation to Opa-Locka. So many people have pegged it as the potential of it already has it.
Yeah.
Now it's just about the possibilities.
And
if it's people like myself arriving, I've had allies support me as a gay person. I'm, perhaps an ally to the Black community, but I'm an ally first and foremost to Opa-Locka and all that it represents.
Awesome.
And that involves bringing others from the outside in. And so that's what November 4th seeks to accomplish. You are more than welcome to invite it. Bring your friends, family, light bites, refreshments, etc. We'll be present. And more important than anything, it's at our historic train station, which was restored, by the way, by 10 North Group back in the 1990s.
Thank you, Dr. Logan.
Thank you, Dr. Logan, and all that were involved in that, because that was a lift. It was a shell of a building. It actually had burned to the ground, basically, aside from the 4 walls. And someone like him saw the potential. That's the only time I'll say it, because that's what it needed to be at that point. Now, in examining it for the future, there's so many possibilities.
Got it.
Having it serve as our venue to start and end the tour is a perfect way to do it. So
the tour is a 1.1 miles. It is 1.1 mile. It's going to take about an hour and a half, maybe 2. We're going to all walk up and down the streets of Opa-Locka, and we're going to learn. We're going to learn about this structure and this house, and these kind of like markers that are in Opa-Locka that are particular and germane to Opa-Locka and its history, and just the Moorish architecture that most people don't realize is in Opa-Locka.
Right.
So that's basically going to be the experience. And then we're going to come back to the train station. We're going to have some light bites, and I'm excited to learn. Like I said, I'm grateful that you're here, because you're giving me, I love to learn. And so you're giving me new information, which I always say, the more you know, all I need is information.
It's power. Power to you.
Yeah,
it's power to anyone that seeks that information. And look, I welcome conversations, questions too. It's a talk. It's not a lecture. Yeah. It's in dialogue. And love
it's a walk. And so
it's a walk and talk.
Shoes.
Yes, it's a walk and talk.
Bring your walking shoes.
We're not a Coral Gables. We're not bursting at the seams with historic landmarks. They have over 1,000. We have 50 or so. But for what we do have and their possibilities, it's iconic. And it's rooted in the Moorish influence, in the North African experience. It is embraced by and needs to be polished by the community that takes ownership of. And it's going to be a great morning. So I really look forward to inviting you, Jane, Isaiah, everybody else.
Jane
it's going to be fantastic.
Isaiah Smalls, 10 North Group. And also, finally, just to invite you, I'm going to consider that the kickoff for the very fabulous Art of Transformation, which is happening, 10 North Group event, Art of Transformation, December 3rd to December 10th in the heart of Opa-Locka on Alibaba. It is considered an official Art Basel event, which is historic.
It's amazing.
And, Dr. Logan, again, and a genius, a real estate genius, and now an artistic genius, an art genius. So you can go to 10northgroup.com to learn more about 10 North Group and the Art of Transformation. And you can go to discoveropalocka.com right?
.org.
.org. And then you can follow Discover Opa-Locka on Instagram, Twitter, everywhere. So
yes.
Thank you very much, Alex.
Thank you, Suzan. And look forward to seeing you all in Opa-Locka.
Yeah.